Hi, Keith Kelly here. I'd like to welcome you to our very first episode of Jumpers for Goalposts Slip Disc. A show where we sit and reminisce about times past with special guests. It's an old format. We simply ask our guests to select 3 songs that mean something to them or that maybe prompts a special memory, and we go on that journey with them. Today's show is produced by Mick Nolan and digitaldub.ie. So today we are delighted to be joined by our good friend, author Paul Howard. Stay tuned. So good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Keith. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
How's tricks with you?
Grand. Yeah. Just like everyone, just learning to live with this madness, that we've had this year. It's just been such a strange 10 months, on top of on top of the lockdown thing as well, sort of dealing with kind of stuff that happens in life as well. I lost my brother this year, and there's just been an air of unreality about it, and but like everyone, just dealing with it day by day.
Yeah, so just before we get stuck into it, Paul, if someone was to drop down from Mars at this minute, could you give us a snapshot of who is Paul Howard?
I don't know. I don't know. How do I define myself? I suppose. I mean, the way I'm most often described is as a comedy writer. I see myself sometimes described as a novelist, but that just seems weird to me because I never ever wanted to be a novelist. Like, I never really wanted to write books for a living. I only ever wanted to write about football, and then alongside that, try to make people laugh. And I suppose I did the first for a lot of years. And then I've done the second for about, close to 20 years. I don't know. I suppose I'm kind of a spoofer, a chancer. I like to think I'm a funny man. This interview may prove otherwise. But yeah,
I agree with them three.
I'm kind of just a lad who's making it up as he goes along. That's to be completely honest with you. I look like I'm in control, and inside I'm just all over the place. And week by week, I send my column into the Irish Times every week, and I say to myself, yeah, right, that's that. I've got away with this for another week.
So you're somewhat of a modern day Arthur Daly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean,
or Del Boy.
I loved. Yeah, I have to coat for Del Boy. You've seen my my John Motson coat, my sheepskin coat. Yeah, definitely Del Boy. But yeah, that's it really. I mean, I left school with my education ended at 17. I didn't go to college. I left school with a pretty poor leaving cert, and went out into the world and wanted to become a sports writer. And so right from day one, I was kind of bluffing it and spoofing it because I didn't have a degree, or I didn't have the years of the years of training that a lot of people in the industry had. I was just turning up at offices saying, I want to write for a newspaper. Would you be interested in publishing this?
Okay. So we're going to jump right into it, Paul. So your first piece of music, can you tell us what it is?
It's Puff the Magic Dragon by Peter, Paul and Mary. And
okay, we're going to have a little short listen to that, and then we'll expand on that, Paul, yeah?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu. Little Jackie Paper loved that rascal Puff and brought him strings and sealing wax and other fancy stuff. Oh, Puff
So, Paul, can you pull that apart for us a bit? Why did you pick that song?
I tell you, I'm feeling a little bit teary listening to it,
Yeah,
as I always
I can see
do.
that.
When I was a kid, my mother used to sing it to me to try and make me cry for a laugh, right?
Okay.
And my dad would come home from work, and I'd be sitting in the kitchen crying my eyes out, and he said, "You singing that song to him again?" I said, and it was just purely for a laugh, you know. And I just there's something about it that still gets me, and it's the same thing that gets me when I watch The Snowman at Christmas time, and it's the idea of Puff. Puff the Magic Dragon represents childhood. I don't believe this. These people who say that Puff the Magic Dragon is essentially is marijuana and that it's a drug song. You know, I
Yeah.
believe the explanation, which is that it's a song about childhood and it's a song about lost childhood, and it's a song about a little boy who has this magic dragon when he has an imagination and when he doesn't look for rational explanations for everything in the world. He's just happy to go with the magic of being friends with this dragon, who probably doesn't exist, but except only in his imagination. And there's a line in the song that just gets me every time, and it's a dragon lives forever, but not for little boys, not so little boys. And it's just about growing up, and there I am as a baby. What an ugly baby. I think that was around the time I won that ugly baby competition in London.
You haven't
And there's
changed a
me,
bit.
there's me on Stoke Newington Common. Um, and there's just something about that line that pulls at my heartstrings every time. And it's just really about, you know, when you're a kid, it's such a childhood is such a happy time because you've got other people looking after your happiness, and there's other people in your life whose job it is to think of your happiness all the time. And then you become a teenager and you realize that, you know, you're responsible for your own happiness, and that happens around that time when you realize that the dragons aren't real, and that these games you're playing as a kid are just your imagination. And it's just a song I've always loved, and you know, my mum was singing it to me to make me cry for a laugh as a kid. It clearly resonated with me very early on, and it just speaks to the child in me, I think.
So, your early childhood, Paul, you grew up in across the water. Yeah.
Mum and dad, my mum and dad went to England in the '60s, like, you know, like huge numbers of you know, young working class people, you know, who didn't have professional careers in Ireland. All there wasn't anything here for them, so they had to go to England. And my dad was in the Merchant Navy, so he was at sea for, you know, 7 or 8 years. My mum was living in England at the time. They were living together in London, but my dad would go off, you know, sailing the world, and then they settled down and they got married, and we were born. Myself and Mark, my older brother, and Vincent, the next brother down. We were born in London, and then we moved up to Luton, and that's when Richard, my youngest brother, arrived. And we lived in Luton until 1979, and then Margaret Thatcher won the 1979 general election. And my dad had said for a long time, if Thatcher wins the election, we're moving back to Ireland. And we just presumed it was, you know, one of those things like, you know, the way Americans say, if Donald Trump gets elected, I'm moving to Canada. We just thought it was that. And we
Yeah.
came home from school, and my mother was packing boxes. And this was like the day after Thatcher won the election. She was packing boxes. I said, "Where are we going?" "We're going back to Ireland." And it was amazing because it was a really brave thing for my father to do. He had a sense that, and my mother too, they had a sense that for a young family, uh, you know, quite a lot, four kids under the age of 10, um, where we were relying on a wage from manufacturing, from factory work, to get by. My dad's wage. We just had a sense that Thatcher wasn't going to be good news for people like us. So we actually went the other way, to the way the immigrant traffic was flowing at the time. Nobody was moving from England to Ireland. People said to my dad at the time, "What? Why are you going back to Ireland? There's nothing there for you." But Dad he was just either really lucky or I think really smart. And so we got the boat and the boat from Holyhead, and we arrived back in Dublin, 1979, the summer of the Pope's visit. My dad had £100 in his pocket, and that was it. You know, he had £100 and 4 kids under the age of 10, and no job and no house. And yeah, so that was the beginning. And interestingly, it was right in the middle of that period of anti-English feeling in Ireland, you know, which was kind of related to the hunger strikes and everything, you know. So we had grown up in England with a sense of being Irish. We kind of thought we're Irish, and people used to say to us, you know, you paddies and all this kind of thing jokingly. And then we came to Ireland and we realized we were English, and we had these Grange Hill accents, you know. We'd say, "Oh, what's your mate? Oh, what? How's it going?" Which we were incentivized to lose very, very quickly. You know, if we were told that's not a good idea to go into school, and you probably remember, Keith, we spoke with these English accents when you met us first.
Yes.
And so that was it. That was my childhood.
But as a young kid of 8 or 9, how was that feeling of uprooting for you? Like as a kid, or did you just go with the flow?
Yeah, I
Or did
think
you have
you're
any
much more.
feelings?
Yeah, you're much more adaptable when you're a kid, I think. Maybe if we were, and that was Mum's thinking in moving when we did as well, that she kind of felt we couldn't do it when we were teenagers. The time to do it was when we were all under the age of 10. But for us, it was an adventure because we'd come to Ireland on holidays. So Ireland was a place that we associated with happy times, like, you know, with drinking. Like the only time I ever had a can of Coke in my life or a can of 7 Up was when we were in Ireland, or walking the pier with an ice cream and things like that. That's what we thought of Ireland. But it was really. I remember being on the bus with my brother, and we were back. I think we'd been back here about 2 or 3 days or something, and we were driving. The bus was going up the Noggin Hill, and it turned around the roundabout there, and there was a wall, and it just on the wall it just said "Brits out," and it was the first kind of feeling, first sense I think we all had that we've just arrived into a country that's quite possibly hostile to us, or at least the country we've come from. And we started school in Oliver Plunkett's National School in Monkstown. We were living with my granny for a couple of years while we were waiting for a house. And I remember Des Cahill's father was the principal of the school. And Mr. Cahill had us in his office, and he's trying to decide what level of education we were at in England, and what the relevant class we were supposed to go into in Ireland was. So I think in England we were in second class, but the equivalent in Ireland was fourth class or something like that. But as I'm sitting in Mr. Cowell's office, I'm looking around the walls, and there's like the Proclamation of Independence. I'm looking at Michael Collins in his army fatigues. I'm looking at like a photograph of the ruins of the GPO after 1916, and I just sort of got this. And he was talking Irish to us, like, which we had no idea what he was talking about. And there was the first time I really got a sense that there was a war going on. If not officially, it was certainly going on in people's minds, and it was certainly going on in the minds of the kids we were in class with, because kids now, they're not engaged. They're not really engaged by the troubles. I hear Fine Gael trying to remind people under the age of 30, like what Sinn Féin IRA did during the Troubles. And they might as well be talking about the Boer War for all people in their 20s. Understand, they feel just so remote from it. And that's a good thing. That's what the Good Friday Agreement was about. It was about consigning that stuff to the past. And no one wants that stuff brought up anymore. But back then, 1979, 1980, 1981, when the hunger strikes were on, and when Thatcher was acting, in bad faith towards Ireland constantly, there was this kind of residual anti-English feeling, this sort of visceral hatred for all things English, and we heard it from the mouths of very young kids, like, who are obviously hearing it at home. so it was a difficult time. Like, you know, I think me and Mark got it the worst because we were that bit older. Vincent was a couple of years younger than me, so I don't think the people he was in class with were engaged by it. But certainly I was 8, so I think it was definitely an issue for me for about those sort of 2 or 3 years in school.
Okay. So, moving on from the farm, you landed in Ballybrack. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Cromlech Fields. We
So,
moved
could
in.
you describe Ballybrack to anybody, listeners who doesn't know what Ballybrack is or where it is? How would you describe it? How could you describe it?
Ballybrack. Well, Ballybrack was the country. It was the countryside, and people went to Ballybrack on their holidays. Like Archbishop McQuaid lived in Ballybrack, and it was considered his country residence. And to meet this demand for housing with the explosion in the population, Fianna Fáil embarked on this house building program, and one of the areas earmarked for it was Ballybrack, and it was very, very new when we moved in. I think the oldest houses, or the oldest council houses that were there, were probably 4 years old, and there were, I don't know how many houses are in Ballybrack. I mean, there must have been, I know there's 150 in Cromlech Fields. The area we lived in, Keith, like with Lambay and Arran and Ackle, there must have been probably 250 altogether. So, and it wasn't on that big a spot of land either, So everybody seemed to have about 4 or 5 kids when we moved in. Every house had loads of kids because the houses were given out by Dún Laoghaire Corporation on the basis of need, and the greatest need was children, having like more than one child. So if you had 4 or 5 kids, you went to the top of the list, and if you had no kids, you were at the bottom of the housing list. So they filled up the houses with the families that had the most number of kids. And when we moved in, it was December the 8th, 1980. It was the day that John Lennon was murdered. And I remember it so well. And the fellow who moved us in was a removal man he lived up in Lambay, and we used to call him Francis Rossi, because he looked like your man from Status Quo with the long hair. And
he lived across the road from me, Jack.
Yeah, what was his name?
Jack.
Yeah, Jack. Yeah.
I can't remember his
moved us
surname.
in. Yeah, he moved us in, and his mates in the van were calling him Status Quo. That was his nickname, Status Quo. Really, really straight hair. But they were still building the estate. Yeah, tin guy, yeah. But they were still building the estate when we moved in. It was still a building site. And, they were sort of they were renting the houses out as they were completed. And then, so it took about another year before the entire estate was completed. And it was amazing. It was an amazing place for a kid to grow up. And without a doubt, the happiest days of my life, because there was a sense of adventure about it. There were so many kids around that you went out every day, and you could fall out with one friend in the morning, confident that you'd have a new best friend in the afternoon, and that's just the way it was. And then you'd be mates with some guy, and then you'd realize actually his brother is sounder than him, and you become mates with his brother instead, And then there'd be these games of football that would just last for hours and hours, and you'd finish with 2 teams. And none of the players who finished were actually there when the match started. You just sort of swap 3 lads that come along, and you'd measure them up, and you say, well, we'll have them 2 and you have him. And then it was the mix of people who lived there as well. That I think that was the extraordinary thing about Cromlech Fields. We, like in our estate, like there was we had travellers living opposite us. We had Vietnamese refugees, like the boat people, like who had escaped Vietnam during the war and had ended up in this council estate in Ballybrack. And then, we had 1 or 2 refugees from the Northern Troubles, like, who were living on the estate, who'd kind of fled the north and were still combatants and living in the estate, and the special branch outside the house watching them all the time. And so there was so much colour going on. That was the thing about it. Like, I live in a Voca now in an estate, and it's just so quiet. Like when I go out during the day, I go out and walk the dog at lunchtime, and there's no noise. There's the kids. There's not many kids out playing and that kind of. not many adults about. Everybody's in their houses. When we were kids, no one was in their house. Like even adults, like, you know, you'd see cars on the road. And Saturdays and Sundays, this is one thing I really miss. Two little legs sticking out from underneath the car. Do you remember that? Like, it's just that's because that's what men did on a Saturday. You can't tinker with your car now, but that's what was a Saturday was. Anyone who had a car was underneath it, like tinkering around with it. And so there's all this color going on, and we had nothing. Like like nobody had anything. Like, so there wasn't much money about, but it didn't matter because nobody we knew had money, right? So like, there was no one on the estate going on skiing holidays, or no one buying a second home in the south of France. So we didn't know we didn't have any money. Do you know what I mean? Like, we it was just that was life, and then, you know, the amazing things happened during that period. Like, the video recorder came along, and we lived out of vans, and there was a van used to come around, and the videos would be in the back of the van. Like, now you just look at a movie instantly, you just sort of click it and there it is. But in those days, you had to wait for Wednesday for Ger Kelly to come around in the video van, and he'd have crates of videos in the back, and you'd sort of pick something that was was in the cinema 7 years ago, was the latest release, you know. And the vans thing is the thing I remember a lot, because everything came from vans. Like, there was a shop van, because there was no facility. They never built anything. Yeah. So Dave, all of our groceries came from Dave, Shop Van Dave, as we used to call him, or Dave Shop Van. And it was brilliant, and it was colourful, and it was just so alive. And I was saying before, you could walk out of your house in the morning and you didn't know whether that day you were going to score the winning goal in a match, as I often did, Keith, as you know.
Great imagination.
You might find a fiver on the ground, or you might get a punch in the face. And all of those things could happen within an hour if you leave in your house. And I always say that's a great preparation for life, you know?
Yeah. Well, when you were talking about the kids' legs or the parents' legs under the car, I always vividly remember on the frosty mornings, you know, even now, my dad, right, getting the four of us out onto the road to push the car up and down to try and get it started.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You never see that either anymore. Do you know what I mean?
No.
You'd have the neighbours out, give us a hand. No, I can't, be legs sorry. Yeah, so all them sort of things out there. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah. Do you remember when Dave Shop Van, the van broke down, and we used to all have to push it all the way? He'd get about 30 kids, and we'd all push it to the edge of outside Archbishop McQuaid's school.
I remember one Christmas, deep snow, and Lambay, where I lived, it was top of a huge big hill, and we got the top end. Don't ask me where we got it, of a VW van. So about 12 of us got in at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And the ice on there, and we'd head straight down to Derek Whelan's house, nearly go through his front garden and into his sitting room. Brilliant times. Absolutely. I loved, as you say, the colourful, the mix of people, playing ball for hours on end. It was great times, wasn't it?
Brilliant. And you know, just... Yeah, I tend to romanticize the past, and my family are always saying, I think you overcolor things, you know. But in the case of Cromlech Fields, I don't think I am. I just remember, you know, I'm not saying the sun was always shining and I was happy for every single second. You know, there was always, you know, the usual things you face in childhood. But I remember just the happiness of... Just like, I remember I would go to Jason Dunn's house, and Jason Dunn was my best friend, and they lived opposite us, you know, and his uncle was Ger Kelly, and they used to store all the videos in the house, and we'd be watching these films that were like, they were pirates, like, that had come from America, like, and they weren't even, it would take about 6 months before they were in the cinema in Ireland, and we were watching E.T. in Jason Dunn's sitting room, and it's been filmed in a cinema in America, and you can see all the heads in front, right? And then you can hear, "Hey, shut the fuck up, I'm filming here." And in the middle of this emotional scene where E.T. is saying goodbye to Elliot, you know, and it was just great moments like that, and the fun we had, and endless games of football, just the games of football that just went on forever, you know. And then the Spanish students would arrive every summer, and they'd be walking through. They'd just be looking at us, like, and they would just, because they were all from kind of rich families in Madrid. A lot of them were Barcelona. They were kind of well-to-do families, and they'd just be looking at us, going, "What kind of feral mess have we brought in here?" Like we were like animals or something to them, you know. And then we'd be playing football with them, and they smelled of this thing called Nanuco. I only found out
Nanuco,
a few years ago, you know.
Yeah.
And I smelled it once. A girl I knew, she smelled it. I said, "Jesus, what's that Spanish student smell?" And she said, "It's called Nanuco," and she got it in Spain. It's a kind of bath oil thing, and they'd be playing football with us, and they'd have a few silky skills, you know. They'd be doing kind of the pullback and the sort of step over and all that kind of thing, you know. And we weren't having any of that nonsense, you know. So we would just go in 2-footed on them, and then they'd just be limping off. They go off to college then for the day, you know.
So we move on a little bit in life, Paul. Your second song is by who?
It's by Madness, and it's called "The Sun and the Rain."
Okay, so we'll have a little listen to that, Paul. I'm glad you picked Madness.
Oh yeah, I had to.
People walking all round and round. I hear the sound of rain falling in my ears, washing away the weariness like tears.
Here we go.
I can feel my troubles running down, disappear into the silent sound. Just walking along. My clothes are so rising to the skin. I haven't a doubt that this is what life is all about. The sun and the rain.
So, Paul, I'm so glad you picked Madness. Madness, I suppose, growing up in my childhood was Madness and the Specials and all that explosion of ska. So why did you pick that?
Well, I suppose I didn't really choose Madness. Like, it wasn't like I went to Golden Discs in Dunleary and heard Madness and said, "That sounds great." It was almost compulsory in Ballybrack to like Madness, right? And what came first was the clothes. And so I was dressed up as a Madness fan, as a kind of young prototype ska, long before I even kind of listened to Madness properly, or listened to the Specials properly, or any of those bands I loved later on. So we had the Harrington jackets and the black stay pressed trousers and the tasseled loafers and the white toweling socks, and it was almost a uniform in Ballybrack. Like, you kind of looked a bit odd if you were under the age of 16 and you weren't dressed like that. But the music would have come to me through my brother, and Mark had great taste in music. Like, you know, he was listening to like the Damned and the Selector and the Specials and Madness, you know, at a really young age. Like, he kind of got music. He kind of understood what was good about that music. And so I shared a bedroom with him, so I had no choice but to listen to it. So it kind of went into me by osmosis, I suppose, you know. But that particular song, "The Sun and the Rain," our mutual friend Mero described as the greatest Christmas song of all time, and I do forget sometimes that it is a Christmas. It came out at Christmas time. It was and it's never talked about as a Christmas song, even though it's more Christmassy than "Stay Another Day" by E17, which I heard on the radio about an hour ago, and I hate it. But "The Sun and the Rain" is one of those songs that places me at a certain place at a certain time. And that place is Cromlech Fields, and I'm making my confirmation. That's where I am. So I think that "Sun and the Rain" was 1983. It was around the Rise and Fall, I think, around that time.
Yeah.
And that was the year I made my confirmation. And when I hear that song, I can remember every single thing about my confirmation, right? Including the fact that I smelled of Brute. I can hear Brute. I can smell Brute when I hear that song, because my dad gave me a bottle of Brute. Like, I hadn't started shaving because I was obviously 12, you know. But my dad gave me my first bottle of Brute. He wore Brute, you know, and I'd be splashing it on. The ad at the time was Henry Cooper, and then Kevin Keegan did it as well, and the Frasers
Kevin
smash it all
Keegan,
over. And I'd be lashing this brood on me, and it's vile smelling. Like, I have a bottle of it here in the house, and I don't wear it, but I like to smell it every so often. I do. I take it out and just have a sniff of it because it just.
And you know what, Paul? It
transports
reminds me of my when I smell brew, and like you, I have bottle here as well. It sends me straight back to watching my father come out of the bathroom full of bits of toilet roll stuck to his face, and I always think, what the hell is he doing after doing in there? And then the smell of brew would just hit you. So that smell triggers off that straight for me. Yeah.
For me, it just brings me back there, and it brings me back to starting in Lawrence's college, and the friends I made in Lawrence's, and it was kind of that period of my life when we moved to the great thing about moving to Ballybrack was when we were kind of in Monkstown, we were in a school where everybody knew each other, and we were the English kids coming in. And when we moved to Cromlech Fields, nobody knew each other. Now, like you were kind of in the area a little bit longer, but we were all still making friends. We were all kind of figuring out the terrain at the same time. So we didn't feel like outsiders suddenly. And then we went to Archbishop McQuaid. We're all strangers to each other there for a couple of years. And then we went to Lawrence's, and the same thing. It was kind of, you become friends with someone because they like the same team as you, or then you become friends with someone else because they like the same kind of music or the same kind of clothes. And so that period of my life, I think, was just such a happy time, those sort of 4 or 5 years, because you could kind of rewrite, you were kind of making it up as you went along who you were and what you were into and all that kind of thing. And that song in particular brings me back to that period, 1983, making my confirmation, starting secondary school, being out and about at night. We used to tell my mum we were going to badminton over in Lawrence's just to get out of the house, at night. And it's just, we weren't drinking or anything, it was just the thrill of being out and about at 13 years of age, My mother couldn't understand why I never played badminton for Ireland, because I was always out of the house playing badminton. You'd be watching the Olympics and there'd be no Irish people on. My mother's like, you never played badminton, Paul. How come you never made it? And but it was being out, and it was. And I hear that song and I can smell not just brood, I can smell coal, smoky coal. Do you remember the air of smog all over Ballybrack before they brought the clean coal in? The smog, I can see the fog, my breath fogging in front of my face. I can smell chips from the Vietnamese van at the outside the school. And the disappointment when you ate them, that chips never quite taste as nice as they smell. They're great and everything, but the vinegar and the smell is, and that's just it. My memory I have this whole memory scape of that time, and that song by Madness puts me back there, absolutely, completely there.
And when you were talking about, I know it was earlier on in your life, you were talking about that sort of hostility because you were English, maybe. So I was totally opposite. I sort of gravitated towards your brother Mark because he was a cheeky chappy. We had same interest in music. I remember vividly in science, which I hated, and Mark was sitting beside me and he hated it as well. And in them days, we used to have these sort of yellow satchels as school bags. And myself and Mark would be just drawing Walt Jabsco. On our school bags. We had these brass end rulers and we'd be scratching Madness and stuff, and we obviously get into trouble in that. But so I sort of gravitated towards Mark, maybe because he was different, And he was a cheeky sod like myself in them days,
he had great personality, and he drew people to him. Like, people were really attracted to him. And, I was saying at his funeral, that he looked like Paul Newman. Like, as a kid, girls would always be saying to me, like, gosh, your brother looks like Paul Newman. And I was very conscious of the fact that I didn't, you know. And any girl who wanted to know me in school wanted to know me to get near Mark, you know. But he was blonde and he had these really piercing blue eyes, like, you know, like you rarely see eyes that color, like, you know, that color blue. And and he was very charming, and you know, and he was great fun, like, you know, and people were really drawn to him. And but Mark was interesting because Mark kept the English accent, and I'd be saying to him, "Are you mad? Could you not? What are you walking around? What are you still talking like? You know, Tucker Jenkins from Grange Hill, like, drop the English accent." But for Mark, it was kind of. I had no problem compromising. Like, you know, I had absolutely no problem. If I wasn't, like, I remember we were getting dressed for school one day, and I remember my mother said, Francis Hughes died. No, it might have been one. No, I think it was Tom McElwain. Tom McElwain died last night. And Mark says to her, who's Tom McElwain? And my mum said, he's one of the hunger strikers. And I remember Mark saying to her, how many fucking hunger strikers are there? Because we were we were in fights every time a hunger striker died, like it was in the playground, like, you know. And I was trying to hide my Englishness, but Mark was wearing his up front, like, and we were fighting pretty much on a daily basis during that period, you know. My dad had this thing. My dad used to say to us, "Don't ever let anyone bully you. Just punch them in the face, right? And and just watch them take a backward step," which would have been contrary to the advice my mother was giving us, which was stay out of trouble. And my dad would be pulling us, going, "Don't listen to your mother. You know, get into a fight if you have to." But Mark was very much of that, had that idea, you know, and he was kind of very upfront about it. But yeah, and I think people were drawn to him because of that, you know.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the corridors with Mark instead of being in science, actually.
Do you remember the fear? Do you remember you'd be standing in the corridor in Lawrence's, and it was a school built in the round, and Mr. McGuinness, the dean of boys, who was the only really strict teacher, he was the enforcer.
It's like Darth Vader,
you know. Yeah, because the brothers were so liberal, and if they had run the school by themselves, it would have been mayhem. So they needed this enforcer figure, you know, this sort of Graham Souness figure. And he would just walk around the school, and he had his shoes tipped, the little metal tips on the backs of the heels, and you'd hear clip, 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 and you knew he was coming, like, and you'd be so fear. You wouldn't even run and hide, you know, because there was just a sense that he'll find me. He can use the Force like Darth Vader and find me.
Yeah. So if we chat a little, just briefly, where did Paul's love of Liverpool Football Club come from?
I suppose I was just the right age to follow Liverpool. If I'd been born 5 years earlier, I would have been probably a Leeds fan or an Arsenal fan. But Liverpool won the European Cup in 1977, and I was 6, and I was just starting to get into football then. So it was just inevitable that it would be Liverpool. My dad is Spurs, because when he moved to London first in the 60s, he used to go with his brothers who all lived in London as well, and they go and see, you know, that team of Jimmy Greaves and Martin Shivers and Pat Jennings. They used to go every home game. He would go to see Spurs. But for me, it was Liverpool. Our local team was Luton Town, and Luton Town unfortunately had a hooligan element at the time, which was the reason we never went to see them. Like, you know, the whole town of Luton would shut down when they were playing a home match on a Saturday afternoon. The shopkeepers would just pull their shutters down because they were just terrified of being looted. So it wasn't a hospitable place to bring kids. And they tried to change it. Loads of Luton Town players came to our school, and I remember they were in the staff room, and we were all being told, "Oh, come and meet, you know, Paul Futcher and Ron Futcher, and maybe Brian Steen was actually playing for them at the time." And the only way they could actually get me to go into the room was by pretending that Ray Clements was in there. I swear to God. And I walked in, and I said to Paul Futcher, where's Ray Clements? And they all just burst out laughing. All the But that was 77, and then they won another one in 78, and then they won another European Cup in 81, another in 84. But when I was very young, we were allowed to stay up way beyond our bedtime to watch big football matches. And most of the big football matches in those days involved Liverpool. So, the thing was, you had to be ready for bed, you had to have your pajamas on, your teeth brushed, all that. And then we'd come downstairs, and then the second it was over, and the challenge was to stay awake for the whole thing. Your eyes just keep going like that, but you're trying to stay awake because you don't want anyone to tell you to go to bed. But being allowed to stay up till nearly 10 o'clock at night was part of the reason I followed Liverpool as well.
Okay. So we're moving on to your last choice, which is, can you tell us?
Yeah, it's a song called "Dream Baby Dream" by Bruce Springsteen.
Okay, let's hear a little bit of that.
Come on, you gotta keep the light burning. Come on, you gotta keep the fire burning. Come on and dream, baby, dream. 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 Come on, darling, and dry your eyes. Come on, baby, dry your eyes. Come on, darling, dry your eyes.
So, Paul, why Dream Baby Dream?
Well, Bruce Springsteen is to me probably the greatest singer-songwriter who's ever lived.
Wow.
I think he's a genius. The fact that 50 years after his first album, he's still producing outstanding work. Like the new album, I'm just listening to it all the time, and it's just not natural for somebody to be still producing great work like that. I think, there has to be a fall off. There should be a fall off. Naturally, there should be. It happens with all artists. I mean, Bob Dylan is writing great songs now, but he went through 20 years where he couldn't write a song. And, Van Morrison had periods where he did nothing. But Bruce Springsteen is doing it consistently. What's interesting about this song is it's actually not a Bruce Springsteen song originally. It's a song written by an electro punk band called Suicide, and it's from the 1970s. And Bruce Springsteen didn't cover many other people's songs. He did Jersey Girl, the Tom Waits song, mostly in concerts, but he mostly does his own material. This song, I heard it the first time. I went to see him in the Point Depot in 2006, maybe 2005, 2006. And it was the very end of the concert. It was the Devils and Dust tour. And he'd kind of done everything on the album, and he'd done, a couple of songs from Born in the USA, a couple of songs from Born to Run. And then he came out for the encore, and he just had this, I don't know what the instrument is called, but it's like a tiny little organ. Is it a melodeon? No, not. Anyway, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a small piano that plays this sort of electronica music. And this song, he built it up really slowly. And I don't think he sang a line for about the first 2 minutes, and it was just the music, and everybody's looking at each other in the audience going, what's this? I thought he was going to do, Born in the USA or something. And then he just starts singing this line, come on and dream, baby, dream. I just want to see you smile. Come on, baby, dry your eyes. Come on and dream, baby, dream. And it's like a mantra. And I think it goes on for about 7 or 8 minutes or something, the song. And I love it because, as I said, it is like a mantra. I find it really calming to listen to. The sentiment is, I love the sentiment of it, and it's I think it's the repetition. There's a kind of familiarity and the security in repetition, and that's what mantras are all about. That's what chants are about, and I was just blown away by it. I just. And everybody is just leaving, and it's all anyone was talking about leaving the Point Depot. It's like, what the fuck was that like, And then of course we all went home and Googled it, and he was on YouTube. There was a YouTube clip of him doing it at a concert somewhere, and it was released on one of the albums that came out subsequently, and I don't know. I was in the car this morning. I had it on in the car, and I listened to
Okay.
it an awful lot, especially after Mark died. I'm not religious in any way. Like, I don't think I'm going anywhere after this. But and this is probably a mark from childhood. I'm still drawn to hymns for some reason. Like, I got up this morning. I was singing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" at about 5:30 this morning.
Okay.
My wife was still asleep, and I woke her up singing. Why are you singing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing"? I don't know. I just love it, like, And I just love hymns. And this song is like a hymn. The way Bruce Springsteen renders it, it's like a religious hymn. And listening to it is like an act of faith. And it's probably the closest thing to an act of faith as anybody is ever going to get from me, But certainly after Mark's death, I listened to it a lot in the kind of months afterwards. And I told Mary, like, Mary knows, like, if I die, like, and if she outlives me, this is the song I want at my funeral. It's the only one I'm giving her to. I just say that's the only instructions. I said, I don't care if you bury me in the ground, cremate me, or put me in the black bin, right? As long as you play Bruce Springsteen singing "Dream Baby Dream" at my funeral.
Well, that sounds good. So just when you were talking about his longevity and the way he never dropped off, that sort of leads me on to Rosser. You've been doing Rosser for so long. It's become such a huge part of your life.
Yeah.
And he doesn't seem to be dropping off yet. Is that something you've thought about? Is that something you've thought about? Or is that something, no, you're just letting it go with the flow?
I used to, because I never wanted to write a book, right? I wanted to be a sports journalist. That's all I ever wanted to do. And then I started this column, and it was just taking the piss out of schools rugby. And it was really just mocking the things that, when I started covering schools rugby, when I was cutting my teeth as a sports reporter, I was just entering into a world that was alien to me, and it was funny to me. I was seeing all these kind of these moms in fur coats and like 6-inch heels standing in the mud of Skerries watching little Turlock playing rugby for Blackrock College, and it's just and then these kind of like hundreds of girls throwing themselves at these horrifically ugly rugby players. And it's just the whole thing. I just thought, this is amazing. This whole world, nobody had written about it before in a humorous way. So I started writing about it in the Tribune and sending it up in this column. I created this character called Rosser Carl Kelly. And then after about 2 years, I started sending up the Celtic Tiger, and it stopped being about sport and about rugby, and it started to be about Irish life, really, and the changes that were happening, a lot of which I just kind of found grotesque. A lot of which I found funny, that the aspirationalism, the materialism, and then funny things like mates of mine I grew up with in Ballybrack, going to their houses and they have a hot tub in the garden and all the family are in the hot tub. I'm not comfortable being naked around my mates, right? But I'm certainly not comfortable being naked around their mother and father, like their 62-year-old mother and father. But the whole family are in the hot tub, and this is the Celtic Tiger, So I was taking the piss out of all this stuff, and then I put some of the columns into a book, and it just went whoosh. It just took off. And at the start, I said I'd do 3. I said I'd do a trilogy, and then they started to sell more and more, and the appetite became greater and greater for them. And then I stopped saying, I said then I might do 5, and then I said I'd do 10. And then I just decided to stop putting a number on it, because it's kind of, like every year, I would always know at the end when I finished a book if I felt there was another one. Like when I finish a book and I kind of think there's 2 or 3 plot lines still open there that I could do, they're a cliffhanger into the next book, and I always think, do we need another book? Could I write another book, and do I need to write another book? And so far, at the end I've always kind of felt, there's another one in it, I will stop one day, but I kind of think while I'm still enjoying them, and while people are still buying them, and while people are still laughing at them, I really do enjoy it. Like I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to write, and while I don't jump out of bed singing "June is bursting out all over," I am kind of aware that I'm really in a fortunate position that I'm actually doing something I really, really love, and I get to work from home, and I just fall down the stairs and sit at the desk and just wobble my head and see what's in it for the day.
So it is something that sort of is very similar to what you were saying about Bruce, that longevity that you have, and it hasn't been a drop off. But is there times when you come down the stairs and you're ready to? Is there times you get a lot of writer's block and you struggle to find that
No,
stuff that makes it happen?
One of my first bosses was Vincent Brown, and if you've seen Vincent Brown on television, you'll know he's not the kind of man you could be saying to him, I won't be writing that this week, Vincent. I've got a bit of writer's block, And I think because I worked for years as a journalist, and I had daily deadlines or hourly deadlines or weekly deadlines, you had to meet those deadlines, and you couldn't say it's just not happening for me today, or I'm waiting for the muse or something like that. You actually just had to do it, and that was kind of good training for me. So I set myself a goal of 2,000 words every day, and sometimes I write more and I feel great about myself, and sometimes I write less and I feel hopelessly depressed about it. But I always have a sense that tomorrow will be better. I think because I'm writing comedy as well, you don't always feel in the mood for making jokes. Inevitably, sometimes you wake up, you come down the stairs, and you think to yourself, "What kind of mood am I in today?" And you realize you're just not in great form, and that can be hard then because you're kind of forcing it a bit. But my attitude is that just write something. You're going to be rewriting this at some point anyway. You're going to have an editor reading it saying, "I think you should change this whole section here." So you're going to be rewriting it. So get something down. You can look at it again the following day and make it better, But the bigger picture thing, I've never the character himself, like, I love putting him in situations that kind of pertain to things that are happening in the news. So I try to keep the weekly column in the Irish Times as topical as I can. So for the last sort of 8 or 9 months, it's all been about COVID and locking down, and his wife baking banana bread for the neighbours while the neighbours are forcing banana bread on them and they can't get rid of the banana bread. That all those things that are kind of happening in all our lives, and just the struggle to stay sane at this insane time, and sitting at home looking at his family going, who are these people? What am I doing with these people? And that's what gets me to the desk every day. There's always something to write about, There's days when I do feel if you took me by the ankles and shook me, you couldn't get another Ross storyline out of me. But then something will happen and I'll think, that's interesting. Like, I want to write about that. And Ross is a good, I think he's a good prism through which to view the world, because his worldview is totally opposite to mine in every single way, and I think that's a nice way. I think that's the best way to write satirically, to write through the eyes of someone whose viewpoint you don't share, to send up his worldview in an exaggerated way by looking at the world through his eyes.
Okay, so before we wrap up, quickly, could you, if there was someone who had the thoughts of maybe writing a book, could you give them one bit of advice to someone, or is it just go for it and see what happens?
Like, I think the toughest thing increasingly about writing is concentration. And I don't think that's just relates specifically to writing. I think it relates to all aspects of our lives. The ability to sit still, that's becoming a skill now. You know, the ability to just like when I was younger, I would get on the bus and I would just look out the window, and I see people on buses now. It's not a kind of qualitative judgment of their life or anything, but everybody has their nose in a device, or you know, mostly a device, but just the ability to sit still and do nothing and just sit with your thoughts is becoming a really rare skill. And actually, as it happens, it's the skill you need most to be a writer. You need to be able to sit in front of your computer screen and just to look at that cursor that's blinking there, waiting for you to write the first word. And the word doesn't come in the first hour, and you still resist the temptation to go on Amazon and shop for something, or to return a WhatsApp message that popped up on your screen. There is 100 things. When I had my first computer, it was a Wang. It was made in Limerick, you know, and it did nothing except word process. I think it cost about $8,000 or something, and my dad had to offer the house as security when we bought it on the ESB bill. Yeah, I think I've only just stopped paying it off, like, you know, 30 years later. And but the Wang was great because the Wang, there was no internet in those days, and the Wang didn't do anything except process words. But now my computer, I can do 1,000 things with this computer now other than work, right? So like I said, I can go and shop, I can return emails, I can get on Twitter and have the crack, I can check what's going on Instagram, on Facebook. So the strength of mind it takes to resist all of those distractions, that's the most important skill I think that a writer can have. And then, like you said, Keith, you're completely right. Just do it. Like, you know, the pubs of Ireland are full of people who will tell you they have a book in them, but they won't write them, because I don't know whether it's a fear of telling a story or a fear of expressing yourself, but the stories are there, and I do think everyone has a story in them, and it's just a matter of finding the right skills to tell those stories.
Paul, it's been such an enjoyable chat.
Likewise, Keith, I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for popping in. Want to wish you and Mary a really happy Christmas.
To you and yours too.
And so we're going to wrap it up. And I'd like to thank Mick Nolan and digitaldub.ie for producing the show. Hopefully see you all soon. Take care. Have a safe Xmas. And if you're feeling a bit low, reach out to someone. You're never alone. Cheers, Paul.